My medical alert bracelet said severe allergic reaction in progress. But the restaurant manager refused to call 911 and said, "You're just trying to get out of paying your bill." The ambulance took 11 minutes to arrive. I know because Whitney, the server who finally dialed 911 from the kitchen when her manager locked himself in his office, told the paramedics exactly how long she'd been begging him to make the call. By then, my throat had closed to the width of a coffee stirrer and my vision had tunneled to a pinpoint. The EpiPen I'd stabbed into my thigh 4 minutes earlier had bought me time, but not enough. The manager, Douglas Brennan, 43 years old and general manager of the Copper Terrace for 6 years, stood in the doorway of the dining room and watched them load me onto the gurney. He was holding my credit card. "She still needs to settle her tab," he said. The lead paramedic, a woman named Vanessa Ortiz who'd been with Chicago Fire Department EMS for 12 years, told him if he didn't get the fuck out of the way, she'd have the police remove him. I heard all of this through the haze of anaphylaxis and the oxygen mask they'd clamped over my face, my body convulsing on the stretcher. Someone in the dining room was filming everything on their phone. Someone else was crying. And Brennan stood there, my credit card in his hand, looking annoyed that the ambulance was blocking his valet parking zone. I'd eaten at the Copper Terrace dozens of times before. It was 3 blocks from my apartment, upscale but not pretentious, the kind of place where you could bring a date or grab a quiet meal alone at the bar. I had severe shellfish allergies, anaphylactic level, the kind where trace contamination could kill me, and I'd always been careful. That night, a Saturday in October, I'd ordered the same thing I always did, the grilled chicken with roasted vegetables, no seafood, no shellfish. I'd told the server, a young woman I'd never seen before, about my allergy when I ordered. She wrote it down. She repeated it back to me. She said she'd notify the kitchen. I watched her walk away and felt that small flutter of anxiety I always felt, the one that never quite goes away when you're trusting strangers with your life, but I pushed it down. They knew. They'd handle it. I sipped my wine and checked my phone and tried to relax. The restaurant was busy that night, every table full, the ambient noise of conversation and clinking glasses creating that comfortable urban din that made you feel part of something larger than yourself. The chicken arrived 20 minutes later. It looked perfect. Char marks from the grill, vegetables glistening with olive oil, a small ramekin of chimichurri sauce on the side. I cut into it. I took a bite. And for maybe 10 seconds, everything was fine. The chicken was tender, properly seasoned, exactly what I'd expected. Then I felt the tingle. It started at the back of my throat, that telltale prickling sensation that I'd felt twice before in my life, both times followed by a race to the emergency room. My hands went cold. I set down my fork very carefully, like if I moved too quickly I might trigger something worse, and I pressed the call button on my medical alert bracelet. The bracelet, a sleek black band with a red medical symbol, was linked to an app on my phone that recorded alerts. It logged the time, 7:43 p.m. It noted my location via GPS. It flashed a red warning on the screen, severe allergic reaction in progress. I'd activated it twice before in 4 years of wearing it, both false alarms when I'd felt symptoms that turned out to be anxiety. This wasn't anxiety. My tongue was starting to swell. The tingling had spread from my throat to my lips. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. I stood up. My legs felt disconnected from my body, like I was controlling them from somewhere far away. I walked toward the server station, one hand pressed to my throat, the other holding my phone with the alert screen facing out. The tingling had spread to my lips. My tongue felt thick. I tried to say, "I need help," but what came out was slurred, garbled. Whitney, the server, saw me first. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God," she said, and she grabbed my arm to steady me because I'd started to sway. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I shoved the phone at her, pointed at the bracelet, tried to form words. "Allergic," I managed. "Reaction 911. She looked at the screen, looked at my face, and I saw her understand. She spun around and ran toward the kitchen, her ponytail swinging behind her. I leaned against the host stand. The room was starting to tilt. My peripheral vision was going dark. Another server, a man in his 20s with a neat beard, appeared beside me. "Ma'am, do you need to sit down?" I shook my head, pointed at my throat, pointed at the bracelet. He looked confused. I realized he thought I was choking on food, not dying from it. He kept asking if I needed water, if I needed the Heimlich maneuver, and I wanted to scream at him that this was beyond water, beyond anything except immediate medical intervention, but I couldn't form the words. Whitney came back with a man in a white chef's coat. He took one look at me and said, "Did she eat shellfish?" Whitney shook her head. "She ordered the chicken. She told me about her allergy." The chef's face went pale. "Which chicken?" he asked. Whitney pointed at my table at the half-eaten plate. The chef walked over, looked at it, and said, "Jesus Christ." He turned to Whitney. "That's the special chicken. It's been cross-contaminated. We prep it on the same station as the lobster. I told the new guy to use the separate cutting board." He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to Whitney, to the other server, to anyone who would listen, already building his defense. I was standing right there, my throat closing, my vision starting to blur, and he was performing damage control. I pulled my EpiPen from my purse. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I'd practiced this 100 times. I'd sat through training sessions with allergists who'd made me rehearse the motion until it was muscle memory. I stabbed it into my thigh through my jeans. The click was loud in the sudden silence of the dining room. People were staring now. Someone's fork clattered onto a plate. A woman at the table nearest me stood up, her hand over her mouth. The epinephrine hit my system like a lightning strike. My heart rate spiked to what felt like 200 beats per minute. My hands went from cold to burning. The tightness in my throat eased slightly, just enough to pull in a thin stream of air. But I knew from the training, from the lectures I'd sat through with allergists, that this was temporary. The EpiPen was buying me time, maybe 15 minutes, maybe 20 if I was lucky, but it wasn't a cure. It was a stopgap. I needed a hospital. I needed an ER doctor to pump me full of antihistamines and steroids and watch me for the rebound reaction that could hit hours later. I needed it now. I looked at the chef, at Whitney, at the bearded server, and I said as clearly as I could with a swollen tongue, "Call 911. The chef nodded. "I'll get the manager," he said, and he disappeared into the kitchen. Whitney grabbed my hand. Her palm was sweaty, or maybe mine was. "Sit down," she said. "I'll call right now." She pulled out her phone. That's when Douglas Brennan walked into the dining room. He was average height, average build, with thinning hair and a crisp button-down shirt with the restaurant's logo embroidered on the pocket. He looked at me, at Whitney, at the EpiPen still dangling from my hand, and his expression didn't change. No concern, no alarm, just a mild irritation, like I'd asked to speak to him about an overcooked steak. "What's going on?" he asked. His voice was calm, detached, bored even. Whitney started talking fast. "She has a severe allergy. The kitchen contaminated her food. She just used an EpiPen. We need to call an ambulance." Brennan looked at the phone in Whitney's hand, then at me. "Did you pay your bill?" he asked. I stared at him. Whitney stared at him. The bearded server said, "Dude, she's having an allergic reaction." Brennan held up a hand. "I understand that, but we have a policy. We don't call emergency services until the guest has settled their tab. We've had people fake emergencies to skip out on payment before." My vision swam. I thought I'd misheard him. I thought the lack of oxygen was making me hallucinate. "What?" I whispered. Brennan crossed his arms. "I'm sorry, but I need to see your credit card before we proceed." Whitney's voice went up an octave. "Are you fucking serious?" Brennan turned to her, his expression hardening. "Language, please. There are other guests." He gestured at the dining room, where at least 30 people were now openly watching the scene unfold. Someone had their phone out, recording. I could see the red light of the camera pointed directly at us. Brennan seemed oblivious. "Ma'am," he said to me, "if you can provide payment, we'll be happy to call for help." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. Instead, I pulled my wallet from my purse with hands that barely worked, yanked out my credit card, and thrust it at him. He took it. He examined it, turning it over like he was checking for fraud. Then he walked to the host stand. He ran it through the card reader. I heard the beep. I heard the receipt printer whir. He brought the receipt back to me with a pen. "If you could just sign here," he said, pointing at the signature line. I scrawled something that might have been my name. My hand slipped. The pen fell. Brennan picked it up, examined the receipt, and nodded. "Thank you," he said. Then he walked back toward his office. Whitney screamed after him, "Are you going to call 911 now?" He didn't answer. He disappeared through a door marked staff only. I heard the lock click. Whitney looked at me, looked at the door, and made a decision. "Fuck this," she said, and she ran into the kitchen. I heard her shouting. I heard the chef shouting back. I heard Brennan's voice, muffled through the door, saying something about protocol and liability and how he wasn't going to risk the restaurant being sued. My legs gave out. The bearded server caught me and lowered me into a chair. "Stay with me," he said. His name tag said Liam. He looked terrified. "Help is coming." But it wasn't. No one was calling. The epinephrine was starting to wear off. I could feel the tightness creeping back into my throat, the wheeze returning to my breath. My hands were trembling. My chest felt like someone had wrapped it in steel bands. I looked at Liam and tried to tell him to call, but I couldn't form words anymore. He seemed to understand. He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling," he said. That's when Brennan came back out of the kitchen. He walked straight to Liam and said, "Put that away. We don't need the liability of an ambulance on our property. She can drive herself to the hospital if she's that concerned." Liam stared at him. "She can't even talk." Brennan shrugged. "Then she can wait until she feels better." The woman who'd been filming pulled her phone away from her face. "You're insane," she said. Her voice carried across the dining room. Other people started murmuring. A man in a suit stood up. "Someone call 911, he said. Brennan turned to him. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to stay out of this. It's a private matter between the restaurant and our guest." The man in the suit pulled out his phone. "I'm calling right now," he said. Brennan stepped toward him. "If you do that, I'll have you removed from the premises." The man laughed. "For calling an ambulance? Good luck with that." He dialed. Brennan's face went red. He looked around the dining room, at the phones coming out, at the people standing, and I saw him realize he was losing control of the situation. He held up both hands. Everyone please remain calm, he said. This is being handled internally. Whitney burst out of the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear. Yes, 911. I need an ambulance at the Copper Terrace on North Clark Street. A woman is in anaphylactic shock. Brennan lunged toward her. Hang up that phone right now or you're fired. Whitney ignored him. She gave the dispatcher the address, the details, everything. Brennan stood in the middle of the dining room, surrounded by angry customers, and I watched the exact moment he realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. I don't remember the next part clearly. I remember the room starting to spin. I remember the sound of my own breathing, high and thin and desperate. I remember Liam holding my hand and saying, stay with me, over and over like a prayer. I remember the bearded server shouting at Brennan, and Brennan turning and walking back to his office, and the door locking with a click that echoed through the dining room. I remember the woman who'd been filming coming over to me and saying, I got everything on video. He's not getting away with this. I remember Whitney bursting out of the kitchen with her phone pressed to her ear, her voice shaking as she gave the 911 dispatcher more details. I remember collapsing forward onto the table, my face pressed against the wood, and thinking very clearly that this was the stupidest possible way to die. And then I remember Vanessa Ortiz's voice cutting through the haze, sharp and professional, saying, We've got you, stay with us, and the cool rush of oxygen as they fitted the mask over my face. I remember her partner, a younger paramedic whose name tag said Lewis, checking my vitals and saying something about my blood pressure being in the basement. I remember the stretcher, the straps across my chest, the ceiling tiles sliding past as they wheeled me toward the door. They took me to Northwestern Memorial. I spent 3 hours in the ER while they pumped me full of antihistamines, steroids, and fluids. Dr. Nina Kapoor, the attending physician, a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, told me I'd come within minutes of full respiratory failure. Another 5 minutes and we'd have been intubating you, she said. She asked me what had happened. I told her. She wrote it down in my chart and I saw her jaw tighten. The manager did what? She asked. I repeated it. She shook her head. That's criminal negligence, she said. You need to report this. I was too tired to respond. I just wanted to go home, crawl into bed, and forget the whole thing. But Dr. Kapoor wasn't done. I'm filing a report with the health department, she said. And I'd recommend you contact a lawyer. What that man did could have killed you. She pulled up a chair and sat beside my bed. I've been doing this for 26 years, she said. I've seen a lot of stupid. But this is malicious. This is someone choosing money over a human life. You have to make sure there are consequences. They kept me overnight for observation. Standard protocol for severe anaphylaxis. They needed to watch for biphasic reactions, the secondary wave that could hit 8 to 12 hours later and kill you when you thought you were safe. I lay in the hospital bed, an IV in my arm, monitors beeping softly, and I thought about Brennan's face. The way he'd looked at me, swollen and gasping, and asked for my credit card. The way he'd walked away. The way he'd threatened to fire Whitney for trying to save my life. I thought about all the times I'd eaten at the Copper Terrace before, all the times I'd trusted them with my safety, and I wondered how many other people had suffered because of his policies. How many emergencies had been delayed. How many people had been forced to pay before receiving help. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. By the time the night shift nurse came to check my vitals at 2 a.m., I'd made a decision. I was going to burn that place to the ground. I went home at noon the next day. I didn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene in my head. Brennan's face, calm and indifferent as I struggled to breathe. The way he'd asked for my credit card. The way he'd walked away. By 3 a.m. that night, I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open, typing a review on every platform I could find. Yelp, Google, TripAdvisor. I wrote it all down, every detail, and I included a photo of my medical alert bracelet with the timestamp from that night. I included a photo of my hospital discharge papers with Dr. Kapoor's signature. I included screenshots from my phone showing the exact time I'd activated the alert. I expected maybe a few people would read it. I expected maybe the restaurant would respond with some generic apology. I didn't expect it to go viral. By Monday morning, my review had been shared over 2,000 times. People were tagging the restaurant, tagging the health department, tagging local news stations. Someone had found the footage from that night. The woman who'd been filming had posted the entire scene to TikTok. The video showed Brennan demanding my credit card while I leaned against the host stand, clearly in distress. It showed him walking away while Whitney begged him to call 911. It showed me collapsing into the chair. It showed him threatening to fire Whitney. It showed him telling Liam not to call because of liability. The video had over 1 million views by Monday afternoon. The comments were brutal. This man should be in prison. Sue them into the ground. I will never eat here again. How is this not attempted murder? The restaurant's social media accounts went silent. Their phone lines were jammed. People were calling just to scream at whoever answered. And then, on Monday afternoon, I got a call from a lawyer named Olivia Grant. Olivia had been practicing medical malpractice and personal injury law for 18 years. She'd built her reputation on taking cases other lawyers wouldn't touch, on fighting for victims when the system wanted them to stay quiet. She'd seen my review, seen the video, and wanted to take my case pro bono. "This is one of the most egregious examples of negligence I've encountered," she said. "We're going to bury them." I met with her that Wednesday at her office in the Loop, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art on the walls. She brought a paralegal, a young man named Ethan who took notes in a leather-bound notebook and nodded along as I recounted the story for what felt like the 100th time. Olivia asked questions I hadn't thought about. Had I signed any waivers when I entered the restaurant? No. Had Brennan ever called 911 himself? No. Had anyone from the restaurant contacted me since the incident? No. Good, she said. That works in our favor. They're trying to pretend it didn't happen. That won't fly in court. She slid a document across her desk. This is a list of everyone we need to depose. The manager, the chef, the servers, the owner. We're going to find out if this was an isolated incident or a pattern. She filed a lawsuit the following week. Negligence, intentional infliction of emotional distress, violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The local news picked it up immediately. I did an interview with a reporter named Jenna Aldridge from WGN, a woman in her 30s with sharp questions and sharper instincts who'd covered restaurant safety issues for years. "What went through your mind when the manager asked for your credit card?" she asked. I looked directly into the camera. "I thought I was going to die because a man cared more about $73 than my life." The clip aired that night on the 6 o'clock news. It was played on morning shows. It was shared on social media. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted interviews. Other lawyers wanted to join the case. Advocacy groups wanted me to speak at their events. And then other people started coming forward. A man named Kevin reached out through my lawyer. He'd had a diabetic emergency at the Copper Terrace 6 months earlier, his blood sugar crashing during dessert, and he claimed Brennan had refused to let him leave until he paid his bill. "I was shaking, sweating, barely conscious," Kevin told me when we met for coffee. "I begged them to call an ambulance. Brennan said I could leave after I settled my tab. My friend literally threw cash at him and dragged me out." He'd never reported it. He'd been too embarrassed, too scared of not being believed. A woman named Diane came forward. Her elderly mother had fallen in the bathroom at the Copper Terrace, hitting her head on the tile floor. Diane had called for help. A server had run to get Brennan, and Brennan, according to Diane's account, had insisted they finish their meal and pay before he'd allow anyone to call for help. "She was bleeding," Diane said. Her voice shook with rage. "She was 83 years old, bleeding from a head wound, and he made us wait 20 minutes while he processed our credit cards." Her mother had needed stitches. She'd had a concussion, and Diane had filed a complaint with the corporate office that had been ignored. The pattern was undeniable. Brennan had a policy, spoken or unspoken, that guests paid before receiving emergency assistance, and apparently, no one had stopped him. I started to wonder how many other incidents there had been, how many people had suffered in silence because they thought no one would believe them, or because they were too traumatized to fight. Olivia thought the same thing. She put out a call through local media. Anyone who'd experienced delayed emergency response at the Copper Terrace should contact her office. Within a week, she had 12 more people. A woman who'd gone into early labor and been told to wait. A man who'd had chest pains Brennan dismissed as indigestion. A teenager who'd had a seizure and whose parents had been asked to pay before Brennan would unlock the door to let the paramedics in. 12 people. 12 emergencies. 12 times Douglas Brennan had prioritized money over human life. The health department launched an investigation. Inspector Raymond Liu, a 15-year veteran of the Chicago Department of Public Health, who'd shut down more than 200 establishments during his career, showed up at the Copper Terrace unannounced with a team of inspectors. What they found went beyond the immediate incident. Shellfish residue on supposedly shellfish-free prep surfaces. No proper allergen protocols. Staff who admitted they'd never received training on handling food allergies. Cross-contamination in the walk-in cooler. Temperature violations. Expired ingredients. Liu's report was scathing. "This establishment poses an immediate and ongoing threat to public safety," he wrote. "The management has demonstrated a pattern of negligence that extends from food safety to emergency response. Based on the evidence collected, including witness testimony and documentation of multiple delayed emergency responses, I am recommending immediate closure pending a full review and potential criminal charges." He shut them down. Posted a red notice on the door. The Copper Terrace was closed. The restaurant's owner, a man named Gregory Carlisle who lived in San Diego and had apparently been hands-off for years, treating the restaurant like a passive investment, issued a statement through his PR team. "We are deeply sorry for the incident and are cooperating fully with all investigations. The safety of our guests is our top priority." It was empty. Hollow. The kind of non-apology designed to shield him from liability without admitting fault. Olivia wasn't having it. She added Carlisle to the lawsuit. "You don't get to collect profits while ignoring a pattern of dangerous behavior," she said in a press conference on the courthouse steps. Mr. Carlisle was sent multiple complaints about his manager. He ignored them. That makes him liable. Brennan, for his part, went silent. He didn't speak to the media. He didn't issue a statement. He locked his social media accounts and disappeared from public view. But Olivia's team found him. They served him with the lawsuit at his home in Lincoln Park. They deposed him. And in that deposition, which I was allowed to attend as the plaintiff, I watched him crumble. He sat across from Olivia in a windowless conference room, his lawyer beside him, a nervous man named Stephen Chen who kept shuffling papers and looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Brennan tried to justify his actions. "I was following company policy," he said. Olivia slid a document across the table. "This is the employee handbook for the Copper Terrace. Can you point me to the section that says you should demand payment from a guest in anaphylactic shock?" Brennan stammered. "It's not written down. It's understood." Olivia leaned forward. "Understood by whom?" He didn't answer. She pressed. "Mr. Brennan, you held a woman's credit card while she was dying. You locked yourself in your office while your staff begged you to call 911. Do you understand that your actions nearly killed her?" He looked down at his hands. "I didn't think it was that serious," he said. "She was talking. She was standing. I thought she was exaggerating." That's when I realized he genuinely believed it. He'd looked at me, at my swollen face and my gasping breaths and my medical alert bracelet flashing red, and convinced himself I was faking. Because to admit otherwise would have meant admitting he'd failed at the most basic level of human decency. It was easier for him to believe I was a scammer than to believe he'd nearly committed manslaughter through indifference. Olivia saw it too. She didn't push further in that moment. She didn't need to. She had him on record. She moved on to the other incidents. "Are you aware that Kevin Lawson experienced a diabetic emergency at your restaurant?" Brennan shifted in his seat. "I don't recall that specific incident." Olivia pulled out a file. "Let me refresh your memory. March 15th of this year, Mr. Lawson's blood sugar dropped to dangerous levels. He requested you call 911. You refused until he paid his bill. Do you remember now?" Brennan's lawyer put a hand on his arm, but Brennan kept talking. "People fake emergencies all the time. You have to protect yourself." Olivia's expression didn't change. "And Diane Fuller's mother, the 83-year-old woman who fell and hit her head, was she faking?" Brennan didn't answer. The deposition lasted 4 hours. By the end, Brennan looked like he'd aged 10 years. The case went to mediation 6 months later. The restaurant's insurance company wanted to settle. They offered $50,000. Olivia laughed in their faces. "Try again," she said. We were sitting in a conference room at the insurance company's offices, a sterile space with a long table and terrible coffee. Across from us sat 3 lawyers representing the insurance company and Gregory Carlisle. They looked uncomfortable. They came back with $150,000. Olivia said no. "My client nearly died because your insured prioritized a $73 tab over her life. We're going to trial, and when we do, the jury is going to award her enough to shut this place down permanently." The lead insurance lawyer, a woman named Patricia Grayson who had a reputation for being tough but fair, leaned back in her chair. "What number are you looking for?" Olivia didn't hesitate. $2 million, plus an agreement that Mr. Carlisle sells the property and never operates another restaurant in Illinois. Patricia laughed. "That's absurd." Olivia stood up. "Then we'll see you in court." The insurance company blinked. They offered $350,000. Olivia looked at me. I looked at the number on the paper. I thought about the hospital bills, the therapy bills, the nights I'd woken up gasping because I dreamed I was back in that restaurant choking. I thought about Kevin and Diane and everyone else Brennan had dismissed, and I said, no. We went to trial. It took 6 days. The courtroom was packed every single day. Local news crews camped outside. The video from that night had been played so many times it had become shorthand for corporate callousness. The jury heard from Dr. Kapoor, who testified about how close I'd come to death. "If the ambulance had taken 5 more minutes," she said, "we would have been looking at a fatality. The plaintiff's airway was almost completely closed. She was minutes from total respiratory failure." They heard from Vanessa Ortiz, who described finding me in respiratory distress and Brennan demanding I settle my tab. "In my 12 years as a paramedic," she said, "I have never seen anything like it. He was more concerned about $73 than whether this woman lived or died." They heard from Whitney, who broke down crying on the stand as she recounted begging her manager to call 911. "I thought she was going to die right there," Whitney said through tears. "And he didn't care. He just kept saying she had to pay first." They heard from Kevin, from Diane, from 6 other people who'd experienced delayed emergency response under Brennan's management. The defense tried to argue that I'd been negligent for eating at a restaurant with my allergies, that I should have brought my own food, that I'd assumed the risk. Olivia destroyed them. "The plaintiff did everything right," she said in her closing argument. "She disclosed her allergy. She ordered a safe dish. She carried an EpiPen. She wore a medical alert bracelet. She did everything except account for the fact that the manager of this restaurant valued money over human life. That's not negligence. That's malice." The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they came back, the foreman was a middle-aged man who'd watched the video of that night with his jaw clenched. They awarded $1.2 million in compensatory damages, $500,000 in punitive damages. The courtroom erupted. People were crying. Whitney, who'd come to watch the verdict, hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. Gregory Carlisle went pale. His lawyers immediately started talking about appeals, but Olivia wasn't done. She stood and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, we'd also like to request that the court recommend criminal charges against Douglas Brennan for reckless endangerment." The judge, a woman named Lucia Fernandez who'd been on the bench for 20 years, looked at Brennan. "I'm forwarding this case to the state's attorney's office," she said. "What I've seen here is unconscionable." The restaurant declared bankruptcy within a month. Brennan lost his job, lost his savings and legal fees, and the state's attorney filed charges. Reckless endangerment, multiple counts, one for each person who'd come forward. He took a plea deal, 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and a permanent ban from working in food service in Illinois. Last I heard, he was working as a night shift manager at a chain hotel in the suburbs, far from anyone's dinner table. Gregory Carlisle sold the property at a massive loss. The Copper Terrace was gone. In its place is a coffee shop that donates a portion of its profits to food allergy awareness programs. They have a plaque on the wall that says, "In memory of those failed by indifference, in honor of those who spoke up." My name isn't on it. I didn't want it to be. But I know what it means. I didn't keep all the money. After legal fees, I had about $900,000 left. I gave $100,000 to the Food Allergy Research and Education Organization to fund training programs for restaurant staff. I gave $50,000 to Whitney, who'd lost her job when the restaurant closed and had been struggling to find work. She used it to go back to school. She's a nurse now. I set up a fund for Kevin and Diane and the others who'd been ignored by Brennan but hadn't had the resources or the evidence to fight back. Each of them got $20,000. It wasn't justice, but it was acknowledgement. And I kept the rest, because Dr. Kapoor was right. I nearly died. I'd spent weeks in therapy dealing with the trauma, months rebuilding my ability to eat in public without panic attacks. I deserved to be compensated for that. The state legislature passed a law the following year, the Emergency Medical Response Protection Act. It made it illegal for any business to delay, refuse, or condition emergency medical assistance on payment. Violations carried criminal penalties. They didn't name it after me, but I was there when it passed, sitting in the gallery with Olivia and Whitney and Dr. Kapoor. When the vote came through unanimously, Olivia squeezed my hand. "You did this," she whispered. I didn't feel like I'd done anything. I just refused to stay quiet when someone tried to kill me through neglect. It's been 2 years now. I still can't eat at restaurants without a spike of anxiety. I still carry 2 EpiPens instead of 1. I still wear the medical alert bracelet, and I still flinch when I see someone in a white chef's coat. But I'm alive. And every time I see a news story about a restaurant updating their allergen protocols, or a manager being trained on emergency response, or someone citing the Emergency Medical Response Protection Act, I think about that night. About Brennan's face as he demanded my credit card. About the 11 minutes I spent dying while he locked himself in his office. About the moment Vanessa Ortiz told him to get the fuck out of the way. About Whitney risking her job to save my life. About all the people who came forward to say, "This happened to me too." I give talks now sometimes. Olivia connects me with advocacy groups, medical conferences, restaurant industry safety seminars. I tell my story. I show the video. I watch people's faces as they realize this actually happened, that someone actually prioritized $73 over a human life. And I tell them what I learned. That staying silent protects the people who hurt you. That documentation matters. That speaking up can be terrifying but necessary. I tell them about the Emergency Medical Response Protection Act, about how one case can change systemic behavior if enough people refuse to accept it. Last month, I got an email from a woman in Boston. She'd experienced something similar, a severe allergic reaction at a restaurant, a manager who'd prioritized protocol over her safety. She'd seen my case. She'd filed a lawsuit. She won. She thanked me for showing her it was possible to fight back. I cried reading that email, because that's the thing about trauma turned into action. It doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't make the scars go away. But it means something. It means the next person has a roadmap. The next person knows they're not alone. Some scars don't heal, but some fights are worth the scars. And some victories, even incomplete ones, even bittersweet ones, change the world just enough that the next person has a slightly better chance. That's all any of us can do. Document, speak, fight, and refuse to let indifference win. If you made it this far, hit like. You've earned it.